Hey, everybody. So, we first want to thank you so much for participating and asking us some really good questions. And we have arrived at the moment that you've been waiting for. We're going to answer your questions. And the purpose of this time that we're going to spend together is for us to share our story, of course, but also we're hoping that our story will be inspiring to you, that you will get some gems out of this, and that there will be some things that will be encouraging to you, whether you are already married or whether you are hoping to be married soon. So, for those of you who don't know us, we are Doc and Delanea, and we've been together for 19 years. We'll be celebrating 17 years of marriage in just a few weeks. And so, the very first question that we're going to answer tonight is, how has your marriage changed over the years? How has your marriage changed over the years?
I would say that our marriage has changed over the years because when we first got married, we were still learning about ourselves. And we continue to learn about ourselves even to this day. However, as time has progressed, we have learned more about what we like, what we dislike. And when you discover those type of things, you are able to better communicate with your
Mm-hmm.
spouse what you need, what your wants are, what your needs are, and give them an opportunity to meet and potentially even exceed your
Mm-hmm.
expectations. So that evolution has occurred within our marriage because we've learned more about ourselves. We've been able to communicate with each other, again, what we like, what we don't like. And then we've hopefully set each other up for success to be able to meet our needs and our wants. So that's what I would say. How about you?
I would say something very similar. The piece that I would add to it is that as we have grown older, we're comfortable with each other. So in the beginning, you're still trying to, like, we don't want to disappoint each other. We don't want, it's a little bit of that in there. And as we have grown older, that piece of it is kind of not there anymore because we understand where we're going. We understand what our destination is and what we want in our marriage and how we want the atmosphere of our relationship to be. And so, that has created very healthy boundaries for us in terms of when we are in conflicts, how we talk to each other, how we resolve things, all of those things today are a sign of our evolution because we obviously, as you grow in years, you grow in trust, you grow in love. So it has really gotten to a place where we're very comfortable with asking what we want and delivering. And like Doc said, not only being able to deliver, but sometimes even being able to exceed those expectations. All right. So the next question is, what if you feel like you are not romantically in love with your spouse anymore?
Mm, That's a that's a deep question. So a lot of times, so when I think about marriage, I think of there are kind of three layers to a relationship, three layers to a marriage. And most relationships start out with the bottom layer of attraction, right? It is typically physical attraction, like somebody is attracted physically to a person, maybe even spiritually attracted to them.
Mm,
And then the next layer is affection. So they move from attraction to affection. And that's that feeling that a lot of people rest in and stop at, is these feelings of, man, I want to see this person do well. I want the best for them. I want to be around them. You have these feelings of affection. And that's what a lot of people describe as love, like
mm,
this feeling of love. But really, the highest level of a relationship, of a marriage, should be based off of integrity,
mm,
right? And so when a person gets married and enters into covenant, what they're communicating to their spouse is no longer is my commitment to you based off of how I feel, but it's now based off of my integrity, right?
mm,
And
mhm,
so if a person has lost the feelings of romantic love or affection, it really gives you an opportunity to dig deeper into your own integrity of your heart? How do you have this heart where you say, I'm going to be committed to who I am as a person and the promises and commitments that I made to my spouse. And a lot of times when you begin to focus on your character, your integrity, you can recapture those feelings of affection or romantic love. But one of the things that I would encourage people on is to say, hey, don't depend on feelings of
Mhm.
romantic love to sustain your relationship.
Mhm.
Depend on integrity to sustain your relationship. That's what I would say.
That's good. So it sounds like, based on what you just said, that integrity and affection is similar to joy and happiness.
Mm, that's good.
Whereas happiness is very much dependent upon your circumstances and what's going on. But joy is a root thing, is something that endures. And in circumstances, just give it an opportunity for joy to grow and for the integrity of joy in your life to grow. So it's very similar in a relationship where your integrity, it's an opportunity. When you don't feel romantically connected, that's an opportunity for you to go to a higher level in your relationship.
All right, we got another question here. Did you experience a sense of losing yourself when you got married?
This is a question that actually I have been asked many times by wives before. And I would say for me, I definitely felt that there was a period of time when we first got married that I felt like I lost a sense of who I was and a sense of purpose in my life. And overcoming that, I realized that it was really more so because I and I'm have been very open about this. I did not expect to get married as young as I got married. So I had just turned 22 years old. I didn't have a intense desire to be married until I met Doc. So I wasn't waiting to be married. Um, and because I wasn't, I didn't do a lot of planning around being married or thinking about what does it look like to be a wife. And so I lost myself because I started to try to assume what a wife was. And being a wife is something that you have to ask your husband what his expectations are. And I didn't do that. So I was just pulling at straws trying to figure out how to show up in my marriage. And I was not communicating that I felt like I was losing myself because there was shame associated with that. And so I was literally pulling at straws, trying things, feeling like they weren't working. And I just did not, I was not, that was not my life. Like I was used to being very successful at the things that I did. And so it was it was a confidence stealer for me. And it was a source of shame. But if you are in that situation, I would say you really have to sit down with your spouse and talk about expectations, because if you talk about expectations and you start from there instead of assuming, instead of even asking another wife, is not really going to get you through that. You have to know what are the expectations for your marriage. And I know that you will overcome it quick, way faster than I did, because I just was afraid to communicate that I was struggling.
Yeah, and I would say for me, I did not have a sense of losing myself. I actually had a sense of even gaining more clarity on who I was, as as a as a believer, as a man, as a husband. Um, I started to get more clarity and definition, if you will, on who I was. So for me, as time progressed, I felt like I was gaining, and I'm still even gaining more clarity on who I am as a man. So it was actually the opposite for
Mhm.
me. Is I gained more clarity on who I was as a husband, as a man, as a person. Is what I would how I would answer that question.
So, how would you explain to a husband of how to get to? Because I kind of gave the wife, if you're feeling like you lost yourself, this is a way to recover from that. What would you say to a husband who may be finding himself in a place like? How were you able to gain that clarity and all those positive things?
I think for me, a lot of times a marriage is like being part of a sports team. Is a lot of times a successful sports team is successful because people have clarity on what their roles are. And
Mhm.
so for me, being part of, playing football, basketball, baseball, being part of all different kinds of sports growing up really gave me an opportunity to understand my commitment, understand my role, and then be able to execute on my commitment and my role in the context of marriage and not letting disappointment stop me from continuing to move forward or allowing disappointment to discourage me, but almost like after losing a game, for an example, is coming back and being like, all right, we're gonna win this next one, right?
Mhm.
We got this next one, let's go.
Mhm.
And so for the husbands out there, I would say making sure that you have clarity on your commitment and clarity on your role,
Mhm.
and staying in your lane. And I think the more that you do that, a lot of times when you are good at what you are supposed to do, more responsibility gets added, and you start to understand, oh, I can do
That's
different
good.
things. And then
Mhm.
your role begins to expand because you've been faithful in the things that you were supposed to do initially. And so the more faithful you are, the more
Mhm.
responsibility is added to your role. And the more responsibility that's added,
More
the more
confidence.
clarity and confidence that you
Yeah.
have moving forward as a husband.
So, is it important to share all of your fears and concerns with your spouse, or should some of the things just be between you and God?
Another good question. I don't think that it's important to share your all of your fears and concerns with your spouse. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not an advocate for uh, keeping secrets from your spouse, but a lot of times is when you have fears or doubts about something, that is actually is something that you definitely want to take to the Lord. Cast your cares upon Him. But the reason I say there are times where you definitely can share your fears and doubts with your spouse, but actually sharing those things sometimes can be detrimental to your spouse because it can cause them to fear and doubt
Mhm.
when they didn't have any fears or doubts about whatever it is that you had fears and doubts about. I learned this from my mentor years ago. He said, when he's praying for somebody and he's praying for God to heal them, a lot of times he does not want to know what their illness is that they're dealing with, right?
Mhm.
Is he doesn't want their illness to impact his faith, right? And what he means by that is sometimes we can think that a problem becomes bigger than the Lord. And
Mhm.
so we have to make sure that when we are sharing our fears and doubts with other people, that we're actually not casting those things on them
Ooh.
because they're not God.
Mhm.
We have to be mindful of we have a relationship, we have an avenue with the Lord where we can share
Mhm.
those intimate things that says, man, I'm struggling with this or I'm afraid of this. And God can literally begin to give you direction so you can begin to sow faith and encouragement into your spouse. So, a
Mhm.
long way for me to say, I don't think it's important for you to share all of your fears and doubts with your
Mhm.
spouse because you can actually begin to make them fearful and doubtful.
Mhm.
But I definitely think it's important that you share all of your fears and doubts with the Lord. All right, we got another one here. How does a wife remember to respect her husband in times of conflict?
Hmm. So, this is actually a really good question for me to unpack because this was a very huge area of struggle for me. So, I would say the way that you keep respect in the times of conflict is being intentional, right? It's easy to be disrespectful. That's like the easiest thing to do. But to show up with honor, to show up with self dignity, and to show up with respect when you're disappointed, afraid, sad, your feelings are hurt. That's really the real work. So you hear often, that marriage is work, but it's like a mystery of what that is. I would sum the work of marriage up to be self-aware, becoming more and more self-aware and mature within yourself, not focusing on him, right? My work is not to focus on him, but to focus on me. And so I was very used to leading with my emotions, right? And everything was urgent. So if I was upset about something, we are going to deal with it right now. I'm going to say what I got to say. And I'm going to, whatever assumption I've made about the situation is what I'm going to lead with. And after time and time again of hitting a wall where I would do that, but the outcome that I was hoping for was never happening. And so, what I had to figure out and learn is that leading with your emotions, and this is really applies to all relationships, but I was able to cultivate this habit in my marriage. And really, what it was is showing up with intentionality. So, something that I do very practical is I write down how I feel. Right, I write it down because sometimes my emotions are raging so high that I need to get that release of getting it out so that I can be rational. Right. And so I write it down. Either sometimes I'll write it in the form of a letter to Doc, or sometimes I'll just write down the situation and how I felt. I read it back and I learn when I read it back that there's a lot of things that I'm saying definitively that are really emotionally based and they are not factual. And then I can take those points and show up with a spirit of curiosity versus a spirit of accusation. Okay. And so going into a moment of conflict, and I'm really curious, I'm seeking understanding, I'm seeking peace, I'm trying to get us to a place of peaceful resolution. That changes the way that the conversation is even going to go, because my intentions are not to be right, are not to get my point across, but I'm trying to come to a point of agreement between the two of us. And I'm humble enough to know I could be wrong. I could have come up with a whole narrative in my mind that makes sense to me, but it could be wrong. Right. And so I also think this is really important because many of us have not had conflict with men before we have conflict with men in relationship. You know, many of us have not been raised by our fathers, and most of us grew up around a lot of women. And women allow each other to be disrespectful, to holler, scream, cuss, and clown, and almost that's celebrated. And because that is a normal practice, what we don't find out is it's not going to work until we're in a relationship with a man who is like, like you're not going to be able to be disrespectful like that. And so I would just say, practice it now. If you're single, practice this in your relationships with your mom, your sister, your friends. And if you are married already, I would say do that exercise that I said. Just give it one try, one try. You're mad, instead of going to your husband and saying, you know, we need to talk, right? Which is going to put him completely on the defense. Deal with yourself and figure out where you are in the situation. Lead with curiosity, lead to seek understanding, and lead with peace. And I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but majority of the time you're going to get the outcome that you're actually looking for.
All right, we got another one here. What's the best advice that you would give a newly married wife? The best advice that you would give a newly married wife.
The best advice that I would give a newly married wife is to remember to take care of yourself, to remember the things that make you feel great, the things that make you feel at your best. Remember that your husband is, number one, probably used to that. But number two, he wants to see you in marriage go higher than you were single versus going backwards. And a lot of times we see women go backwards, right? We see wives start to let themselves go and let their things that matter to them go. So I would say, when you think about the fact that you want to love your husband, you want to serve him, you want him to be happy, understand that part of his satisfaction is knowing that you're okay. And so when you have to wonder, a question that you should ask yourself is, I love him, but how much do I love his wife? How well am I loving my husband's wife? And let that help you to know if there are spaces and places in your life, in your current state as being married, that you're letting go, that you're throwing away. You know, if spending quiet time and journaling and devotional time is important to you, but now you've gotten away from that because you're trying to jump up in the morning and go cook breakfast, understand your husband probably would rather see you show up having done what matters to you, then he would want to see you negate that and do something for him. And then he has to deal with seeing you go in a backwards direction. And then a lot of times not even really understanding what's going on. So take care of yourself. So this is going to be our last question for this Q&A. And so I do want to take an opportunity to thank you all for hanging with us today. Thank you for listening to our thoughts. If you have enjoyed the video, please comment. Feel free to share with other people. We would like to hear from you. So, you know, if you have some thoughts on some of the things that we shared, we definitely would want to hear from you. And hey, we may come back and do another Q&A. So if you have other questions for us, you can also ask. In fact, we will if we have other questions that come. So feel free to ask us any additional questions as well. So the last question, the grand finale here, Doc, is, what is the best part of being married?
Another great question. And I just, before I answer the question, just want to echo Delena's sentiments. Thank you all for sending in the questions. I hope that this has been a good time for you, an educational time for you. If you could know behind the scenes some of the conversations that Delanea and I have had, it has been fun at times. Absolutely. Absolutely. At times, so the best part of marriage, I think this is a great example. This is a great example of us doing these videos together. I would say the best part of being married is you don't do life by yourself. The scripture says it this way, is that God said it is not good for man to be alone. And so the best part of marriage for me is that I'm not alone, right? And I have family, I have friends, I have people that I love, and I have people that love me. But being in our marriage, knowing that we love each other, and when we do life, whatever, you know, whether it's Delanea writing her blogs, Delanea posting different things on social media, she's not doing that by herself. She's doing it with me, even if I'm not a part, you know, technically a part of it, and vice versa. Things that I like to do, that I enjoy doing, I'm not doing it by myself. I have a built-in partner. And so I am good because I have a wife, right? I'm in a good space because of my wife and the wonderfulness that that brings of doing life together, sharing life with somebody, having somebody to enjoy life with is what I would ultimately say is the best part of being married.
I can't probably come behind that. I would say that I definitely agree. I would add, the thing I would add is that we really see each other, right? We see the best of each other. And so because we do, we don't have a hard time calling each other on the carpet. You know, when I'm not going at the highest level that I'm capable of, Doc doesn't have a problem saying something to me about that. And vice versa. We want the best for each other, and we can receive that from each other because we know that at the root of any type of criticism that I'm going to receive from him or he's going to receive from me, we know that we want the best in each other, and we see the best in each other. And when we don't see each other performing at our best, we're like, oh, hold up now, you know you can do better than that. So that's what I enjoy, is just having somebody who sees me completely and wants the best for me, and sometimes even pushes me when I'm not able to push myself. So that's it, y'all. Have a good day.
Have a good one.